all the things I'd heard about trumpet playing from all these great teachers led me not to be able to play the trumpet at all. Whereas when I started researching other things, I found I could get around and make things happen. So the process of learning how to play again with no strength in my lip was a kind of a clarifying process for me in weeding through all the information and all the advice I'd gotten from these years of trumpet lessons and seeing what was not helping me and what was.
This episode contains adult language and adult humor.
Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults?
If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Brad Goode. Brad, well, he's old school. While many of his contemporaries were learning about jazz in the halls of academia, Brad was getting his education the traditional way, jamming and hanging with the masters of their craft. But Brad's unique sound was almost silenced by severe chop problems, leading him to develop a deeper understanding of the mechanical workings of the embouchure. And that knowledge has not only given him back his voice, but has taken his playing to new heights. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. All right, and welcome to a new episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang, and I am joined by Mr. Brad Goode. Brad, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you very much, and very happy to be invited to join you in your podcast.
Man, this is so much fun, and this is today's hang is definitely one of those ones where I'm getting to know you. Sometimes I talk to old friends, and today is a time to hopefully make a new friend. And through the fraternity of trumpet players, the crazy lot that we are, so we have this common ground. I think that it's really important that as a community that we share our not only our mutual love for the instrument, but our mutual experiences and the
Absolutely.
things. Yeah. You've got a very interesting situation where you are not only a phenomenal trumpet player, but you're also you're a very versatile musician. So you have other tools in your arsenal besides that piece of brass tubing that we all love. So what else do you play and teach?
Well, I mean, I'm a jazz studies professor, which means that I'm working with all students on every instrument and voice to help them with their musicianship. And so in my position here at the University of Colorado, I'm the jazz improvisation teacher, and I teach jazz history with the graduate students, the master students and the doctoral students. I teach jazz pedagogy, which is something I'm very passionate about, talking about how we teach jazz to people, and that's a very strong love of mine is teaching and sharing with people who are in the process of wanting to become college jazz teachers is something I really love doing. And then I'm also the jazz trumpet professor at the university. So we have two trumpet professors. We have a quote unquote classical trumpet professor, and that's Dr. Ryan Gardner, who's a wonderful teacher and performer. And he's got about 25 students in his studio, and I have 12 people who are jazz majors, but their main instrument is trumpet. So it's trumpet lessons, improv, jazz history, jazz pedagogy, and as far as being a multi-instrumentalist, the instruments I play professionally are aside from the trumpet are the bass and the drums, but I'm a dabbler on a lot of the other instruments, and of course use the piano all day, every day, both in my own practicing and teaching, but I also love to play the piano, but I wouldn't call myself a pianist for certain.
Yeah. Well, in the educational process, especially for people who want to be educators, going through your methods classes and learning how to play all of the basic instruments, that's always been part of the structure. And definitely piano skills. I wish my piano playing was much better because it definitely helps with your ability to compose and arrange and understanding harmonic structure. But I've always found that players, particularly a player like of a horn like us, or a vocalist or things like that, that also have abilities in like really good abilities in rhythm instruments, have a really unique approach. And I think that like as I was going through your resume, the idea of I really love the idea of having a really solid working, like professional level working ability on drums and on bass, gives you kind of a really unique perspective on the way the trumpet sits in with the foundation of the rhythm section.
Yeah. So I've seen the band from both sides now, as the song says.
Yeah.
from the front and the back. And so yeah, I think you said it. Rhythm is the foundation of all the music that comes from African American influence and certainly from the West African influence and something that I've been very involved with over the last 15 years or so is playing with a lot of West African musicians and playing that music and really reinforces what I thought I knew and what I thought I loved about jazz and the jazz tradition, which is that rhythm is at the heart of everything, and the ability to speak in rhythm and deal in rhythmic language is really a strengthening factor for any modern musician, and also that music is an oral tradition, because of course in West African culture there is no written tradition of music, so everything is ear training, everything is memory and ear, and so having that awareness, I think certainly makes a difference in the way I approach the trumpet. Also as a bassist, and my early jazz experiences, my early professional experiences involved older musicians being really excited that a kid wanted to play the upright bass because this was the 1970s and everybody was telling us the upright bass was dead. And there weren't that many young people interested in playing that instrument and playing straight ahead jazz at that time. And so just the fact that this kid was hanging around wanting to play, it was almost like this, oh kid, you got a bass, you're in, so having to be the bass player, one cannot BS. So a baseball player, you go to the plate, 3 times out of 10 you get a hit, and 7 times out of 10 you strike out. You're an all-star. A bass player, you miss one note and the whole band spins around and stares at you as if to say, why did you miss that note? why did you play the wrong chord? So you're in a position where you have to be responsible for the harmony all the time or you're in trouble. So that's never not been a part of my thinking as a trumpet player. Whereas many horn players can go for a while before they run into the problem of having to really deal with the harmony, and we can get by on our good looks and our cool sounds. But as a bass player, the music doesn't allow that. So I never considered, from the time I started trying to be a jazz trumpet player, that I wouldn't be responsible for my harmonic decisions at every moment. So that certainly these other instruments inform the way I deal with the trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
big time. Yeah.
So was trumpet your first instrument, or?
I started as a little kid violinist. When I was very young, when I was 3 years old, 4 years old, my parents would play the stereo, and my parents didn't listen to jazz or classical music. They just listened to pop music. But if they would turn the stereo on, I would stand in front of the speaker entranced. And if they turned the stereo off, I would scream. So somebody said to them, get this kid music lessons. But they didn't know what to do. So my father taught at a school across the street from our apartment in Chicago. And he heard there was a man coming once a week to give violin lessons. So they got me a little half-size violin. I was 4 years old. I went to the basement of this old school, to the boiler room, and studied violin with Antonio Menegini, who didn't really speak English. And all I really remember is I wanted to wrap my thumb around the neck of the violin, and you're supposed to keep your thumb up. So he was constantly whacking my thumb with his bow and screaming at me to keep my thumb up. So this was like, like out of a Charles Dickens novel.
Right.
Music lessons. I didn't take to the violin. I didn't play with other children in groups. I was just being subjected to some cruel form of torture. And I quit after a few years, but I picked up the guitar and taught myself to play rock and roll guitar by listening to the radio and imitating and kind of starting to transcribe and steal things in my own way. And by the time I was 12, 13 years old, I was playing in the garage bands in my neighborhood. And then I joined the school band and picked the cornet, and just for no apparent reason. So the kind of strings were home. Strings were the original instrument. So I always picked up a string instrument and kind of went, yeah, I can do this. Yeah. I did it when I was a child. The brass instruments became more of a journey and more of a mystery. As you look at it, say, well, how do you make a sound on this thing? And so there's the trumpet lifestyle beginnings. Yeah.
So how did you make that transition from being the rock and roll guitarist to becoming a jazz head? Yeah, what was your gateway into the jazz?
This is an unusual story too. I used to take the bus I was taking trumpet lessons, and I was studying, trying to learn to play the first movement of the Haydn concerto and trying to play my Clark studies, and had a very good teacher. The bus stop where I would catch the bus home was outside a used record store, and one day they had damaged LPs outside the store in a box. Apparently they were too damaged to sell, and the box said free, take one. And I found one that had a trumpet on it and took it, and it was a record called Don Cherry, Where is Brooklyn? It was Don Cherry, Pharoah Sanders, Henry Grimes, and Ed Blackwell, and basically playing like primal scream bebop. And I took it home and I put this record on, and I remember lying on my bed just mind blown, like, you mean that's allowed? You can do that with a musical instrument? And that was really the day that my life changed. Then I started going to that record store on purpose, looking for more records, and one thing led me to another. I was one day I had a bedroom. We had a ranch style house, and my bedroom had a window that went up right onto the front porch, and I had a Dizzy Gillespie Charlie Parker record on, and I had it cranked up, and I was just didn't know what I was doing, but I was going for it, playing my trumpet along with this record, trying to do something. And there's somebody knocking very loudly on my window, and I thought it was one of the neighbors complaining about the trumpet playing. So I opened the shades, and it was my father's friend, Mr. Bierman, from down the block. And he's saying, open the window, open the window. I opened the window, and he says, Bradley, you like Dizzy Gillespie? I said, yeah. Why? He said, come outside, come outside. So I go outside, I follow him, go down the block to his house. He takes me in the basement, and he opens up these photo albums, and he starts showing me pictures. He says, you see, this is a picture of Kenny Burrell's first record date. And he's showing me all these black and white photos. And I'm thinking, like, what am I looking at? Where's this guy coming from? Well, it turns out he had been the manager of DG Records when Dizzy Gillespie owned his own record label.
Wow.
in Detroit for a short time. And he says, Dizzy's coming to town next month and we'll go hang out with him. Man. And sure enough, that is what happened. And so after that experience of hanging with Dizzy before his concert, going to the concert, after the concert, and having him encourage me, and that was pretty much the end of it. I was just like, I am going to be a jazz trumpet player. I had nobody else around me who knew anything about jazz, no parents, teachers, friends. I was just on my own. And then luckily, Mr. Bierman heard me practicing. And that's really what happened.
Wow. That's a great story.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. And that's what's so interesting, when you just think about the circumstances of life. You just never know what opportunities are going to present themselves to you. They say, the opportunity knocks at your door, but in this case, opportunity knocked at your window. So
really, quite literally, yeah.
Yeah. And that, sometimes they say that like luck, the concept of luck is when opportunity meets preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
And that it sounds like, all of the little pieces to your life, that have come together. There certainly is that level of serendipity that went on with it, but there's also that burning desire and that work, the shedding that you did. Because if you had just been listening to Dizzy, it'd have been one thing, but it was the fact that you were shedding and you're putting yourself out there and doing the grind that you needed to, that's what made it all come together. So like when you're teaching, because the situation has changed so much in terms of accessibility to music and artists. What are some of the traits that you try to instill in your students that to give them to the best place possible to be prepared to enter the world of jazz and jazz education?
Oh, that's a difficult question. That's a good question. I kind of see my job as having two important components. One is to share with them the basic musicianship and instrumental skills they're going to need to be a successful musician. So your nuts and bolts of, sight reading, understanding rhythm and harmony, being able to have technique on your instrument, being able to understand these things, knowing how to develop repertoire, memorize songs. These are the basic things that are going to serve them hopefully well, whether they go into performing in any area of music, or they go into teaching. They're going to need to be good musicians themselves, if they're going to be teachers. So that part is kind of like trade school. you know, you need to be able to single tongue, double tongue, triple tongue, doodle tongue, play high, play low, sight read, sight transpose. These are the things I think these students should have. And then the balance is, who are they as individuals? What are they interested in? What do they want to do? What are they aspiring to do? And so in that way, to teach each individual person differently according to who they are, what their learning style is, what their aptitudes are, and what their goals are. Certainly the last thing I want any of my students to do is play like me or think like me. I think trying not to be that person is important. I mean, obviously, once in a while, I'm going to have a student who's drawn to trying to do some of the things I do, or play some of the things I play, and that's fine. That's just influence. But allowing them to become themselves and trying to help facilitate that without getting in their way of doing that is the other part of the job. So it's this balance between giving them what they want, or helping them to find out what they want, and giving them what I think they're going to need. I think that's the tricky part.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, I guess with every style of music, it's necessary to have your own personality, your own expression, your own voice. Mm-hmm. But I think as a jazz musician, to be playing the art form of jazz, that isn't, there is no option. Those are the things you have to be able to do, because jazz is supposed to be this unique expression of where you are and who you are at this moment. That's the art of improvisation is taking what you got and making something new out of it. Mm-hmm. And if all you're doing is learning how to regurgitate licks, then you're not really being a true jazz musician. You're mimicking. So I like the fact that you have already touched on the fact that it is a unique and individual learning process for each student, helping them to discover their unique voice. So when you're looking at that balance between the wants and the needs, how did you go through that process for yourself? How were you able to determine these are the skills that I need, and then these are the desired outcomes that I want, and how did you personally learn how to balance those things out?
Well, in some ways it might have been easier for me than it is for some of my students, because I didn't study jazz formally. So I never had anybody telling me what I needed to know, or how to do it, or how to how to study it, or how to learn it. I was just kind of left on my own to figure things out. And at the same time, I had this very excellent, very well-structured education in classical music. So I have an undergraduate degree in classical trumpet, and I have a master's degree in classical bass. So I was getting, and I had fantastic teachers, the best, who helped me learn how to learn, and learn how to practice, and learn how to solve problems, and grow. And they were also great models on how to teach a lesson. So if I applied these learning techniques to the things I wanted to understand, I had a way of structuring my own practicing, so even though I'm a self-taught jazz player, I could figure things out the way I wanted to do them. And something that, learning jazz outside of school in those days, I'm probably one of the last people to really learn in this old school way of just going to clubs and trying to hang. So I have to go back home and figure out what went wrong and what I could do next time to not fail so badly, to try to hang in with the experienced musicians. Nobody ever once told me what to play. Nobody suggested to me that there were scales that I should know to use to play over chord changes. Nobody ever said to me I should copy somebody else and transcribe a solo. These were never things I heard. Now, I had acquaintances who were my age who were studying jazz at other schools, and I knew they were doing that stuff. But that didn't sound like the stuff that I was observing in my experience. As a matter of fact, I observed the opposite, that the tradition of the music suggested that what was interesting was somebody who had something unique to offer. And so I knew about transcribing solos and the idea that, you would take this influence of copying other people and, meld it into something of your own. I'd heard this philosophy, but I didn't believe it. It sounded like cheating. I thought, if I could just play what somebody else plays, then I don't have to figure out myself what to play that is mine, and that would be cheating. So that's I just kind of made up my mind that, I'm not going to do that. So I didn't have to figure out how not to be like somebody else. I've always just been me, and the thing I had to figure out was how to be a clearer, more sense making musician as me. So and maybe that was a longer, more involved process, but to answer your question, I didn't have to make the choice. It never occurred to me to do anything else.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, I mean, I think everything has got its balance, where there's good stuff about something and there's equally bad stuff about any situation. And there's certainly something to be said for having that guidance, the mentoring, the traditional educational system provides. The minus of that is that sometimes we're limited. We're limited based on the concepts that the teachers have, and that they often have a one-size-fits-all approach to pedagogy. And conversely, the just figuring it out on your own, there's a wonderful freedom that comes with that, because that is a truly unique experience. And the problem is that sometimes you get detoured because you don't have somebody that can be there to help you to avoid the pitfalls. I always just tell my students, I can't give you a shortcut. My job is not to give you a shortcut to attain mastery in whatever it is you're trying to do. My job is to help you to avoid the detours. It's going to take you however long it takes you to get it. But I can certainly give you some practical experience, from practical experience, that this path will probably take you longer to get there. So it's not that it's a shortcut. It's just avoid the, I'm like GPS. I want to give you the shortest route. So
well, I think we all teach both from our own experience, and in some ways we teach as we were taught. whether that was formal teachers or informal teachers, and my the mentorship that you mentioned, I was such a lucky kid. I mean, I was so lucky because I just kept kind of shuffling from one person who would take me in and help me to the next one, and I did this for a long time. I was able to play with older musicians, and although I didn't sign up for lessons with them, the lessons I got from them were so important and so ever present, spending so much time with them over so many years that now I'm saying something to a student, and the student will leave, and I'll say, well, where did I get that idea? And I'll go, oh, that's what Ira Sullivan used to say to me all the time. That's what so and so. I just, the things coming out of my mouth were the things that my mentors and my teachers used to say to me.
Yeah.
And so this is what forms us as teachers, I think.
Well, I think that across the board, whether it's music or any other art form or any environment where you're trying to develop skill, there's the formal learning process and there's that informal. And the informal is just the hang, like what we're doing right now. It's being around people, it's observing them, it's talking to them and getting a broader sense of their perspective, not just on that particular skill, but on life in general, because that's what drives everything. Your approach to life is going to be foundational to how you approach your music or whatever skill you're trying to develop. And I think that those lessons are the ones that make the greatest amount of impact, because a lot of times our guard is down. Because when we're trying to learn, sometimes we put our guard up and we're kind of filtering things and forcing ourselves to analyze and critique what's being told to us, as opposed to kind of absorbing naturally and somewhat through osmosis when you're hanging around the people that that you respect and that you admire and probably if you're hanging out with them, you like them. And so it can be this very natural and organic process of the sharing of information, which I think is a big part of particularly older cultures, that especially like with music, of so much music being oral tradition, like you were saying, like the West African music being oral tradition, that just requires being around people and being absorbed in that environment so that it becomes part of your DNA.
100%. It's a communal art form. Absolutely. Yeah.
So as a non-traditional student of jazz, let's say that, since what is the tradition of jazz? What do you see as an educator now, as someone who didn't go through that process that now you are a part of as being an educator? What do you see as being the biggest holes in our current state of jazz pedagogy?
Oh, that's a 5-hour answer you're asking for, because that's my jam right there. I'll be brief. Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. First of all, it is an oral tradition, and if you're learning to play by theory, or if you're learning to play by reading chord changes, you are learning with a visual tradition, which is how we teach classical music. So first of all, the attempt to fit a square peg into a round hole is what's happened trying to get traditional universities and conservatories to accept jazz as a curriculum. Has been a process generally of trying to make it look like classical curriculum so that it looks acceptable to non-jazz people. So most of the problems have come from that, to the point where there's generations of jazz musicians who don't quite understand that making a solo by using theoretical concepts over chords that you either see on a page or see on a page in your mind is not the same process as playing what you hear. And so many of our students don't even realize those are two different things. Of course, as a working musician, you need both skills, because somebody's going to shove a set of chord changes on your music stand and push the record button, and you're going to have to sound decent. So you need to know how to read changes, but it's not the same art form. And so that's the first place where it falls apart. The second place is where we separate people by ability level. And here's the first band, here's the second band, here's the third band. You're in the top combo, you're in the second combo. That's totally bogus and destroys the idea of the music being a communal experience, and it destroys the mentorship process. It robs the students of the ability to have that kind of experience. So to correct for these things that I see as glaring annoyances, I'm on a soapbox all the time. So what we're doing here at the University of Colorado is every group is composed of doctoral students, master students, upperclassmen, underclassmen. That's how you make a group. Our big bands are made that way. Our combos are made that way. Also, the teachers play in the ensembles. They don't stand in front of the ensembles and critique them. So we learned by playing with more experienced players. We didn't learn by people telling us how to play and how not. Certainly they told me how not to play. I heard that. I'm still hearing that. But play with the students, make everybody feel included all the time. The experienced players have to be playing with the inexperienced players and vice versa. Otherwise, the whole thing breaks down. So it's all about the ear. It's all about rhythm. And it's all about the cross-generational experience and the sharing. So that's the 5-hour answer into 3 minutes there.
Well, I would love to hear the 5-hour answer.
Oh, I can tell you everything that's wrong. I'm a great critic.
Yeah.
Doing the things that are right is an hourly experiment.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really a crucial thing to think about, whether it's a discussion of music or life in general. That we all tend to be really great critics.
Yeah.
But it's being willing to try to develop a solution, and not just. I think it's the humility of knowing that you may not know a better way, but you're sure as hell going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
And I used to tell my employees that, it's like, look, I don't want you to. I know that I've got problems here, in this school that I'm running. I don't want you to come in and complain about what's going wrong, unless you can also provide me with a potential solution to the problem. It doesn't mean that I have to accept it. It doesn't mean it's the right one, but I want you to get out of this mindset of always trying to find what's wrong, but I want you to trying to identify how can you problem solve.
I went to my fellow faculty members several years ago. I said, we absolutely have to stop making the students play these juries. This is not helping anybody. It's not fun. It's not fun for them. It's not fun for us. Turns the whole semester into this public school teaching to the test experience. Everybody's not coming from the same place at the same time. And they asked, well, what would you do instead? Just like you're saying. I would said jam sessions. So that's what we're doing. No more juries, lots of jam sessions.
That's awesome. I mean, it's because
yeah,
it's like you train someone, and that's my biggest beef with the educational system as a whole, is you're training someone to approach life in a way that is completely different than the real world.
Yeah.
If you're going to give somebody a skill, give them a skill, and if you're going to have to measure it, then measure it in terms of real world results. The juries, I mean, how many times, other than like if you're on the audition circuit, and you're playing auditions, trying to the symphony, you're never going to do that.
Yeah.
You're never going to have to do that. You're going to have to play in a club. You're going to have to play with other musicians. You're going to have to, do all these different things. And even skills outside of that, outside the playing skills. I know a lot of the educators that I've talked to on this show, they talk about how they are incorporating more modern day skills, things like learning how to manage social media, how to utilize, electronic recording equipment, all the things that you're going to have to do as a working professional. These are things that you should be learning, not just, the regurgitation of the same old repertoire or, the old way of doing stuff. So I really commend you on just taking those steps forward.
I have my little pet presentation, and I actually gave this lecture at Gen at the Jazz Education Conference several years ago. That the way, basically, my thesis is this: people learn to play jazz very well before they learn to play jazz in school. Not to say we shouldn't be teaching jazz in school, but let's examine how people learn to play jazz and see if we can make school more like that. So the name of the presentation is The Traditional Jam Session as a Model for Jazz Education. So what happens in a good jam session? What doesn't happen? How do people learn in this environment? What works about this? And not just about having jam sessions, although that's definitely a part of the thing, about the value of jam sessions themselves, but what are the values that come from that style of learning, and how can we instill that more in our classes and less lecture test.
Yeah. That's cool. That's very cool. I have to dive into that at some point and see what you have to say, because I think that's jamming, whether it's learning to play jazz or the way we learn to speak a language. That's how we do it. It's the mentoring, it's the improvisation, it's being willing to put yourself out there, to be around people that have a higher skill level than you, and to learn from your mistakes. And I think so many of us are so afraid to make mistakes, and that a lot of that is the guilt lays on the more experienced people who sometimes have a tendency to make the younger or less experienced player feel insecure and inadequate, instead of encouraging them to do something.
My experience as a teenager, trying to go find people who knew jazz, like I said, that they weren't in the environment that was provided for me. So of course my first way I learned jazz was by arguing with bouncers. Trying to get them to let me in, or right. Could you please go get one of the musicians and they could vouch for me, and could please, standing at the doorway to bars and things like this as a 16-year-old kid. But when I went to sit in with the experienced players, I wasn't good enough to be playing with them. They knew that. I knew that. They didn't say, "Get out of here, kid, and never come back." That's not what I got at all. I got the opposite. Oh, you're interested in learning this music? Okay, then. Well, you're with us now. We'll help. I mean, that's the tradition right there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yes, it's the nurturing aspect,
Yeah.
So I think that's great. Well, I do want to switch gears, and I certainly talk about this concept for hours. But I do want to talk about your experiences with dealing with embouchure change, because much like learning jazz, I think the stigma around embouchure change and the necessity, whether it be to help to just make a player a little more efficient in their playing, or to deal with some sort of setback, or some catastrophic injury. I think that not every teacher is skilled enough in the ability to be able to diagnose and then to create a structure to help someone get through those processes. So what has your experience been, and how has your personal experience affected your use of these methodologies in your teaching?
Oh, you're asking these questions that are so. My answer is so involved. It involves so many experiences. First of all, thanks for asking that. I do now find myself in the position of being able to help people, which gives life a kind of a purpose, really. And I like that. I like that if somebody's struggling, there's somebody who can help them struggle less. Because some of my early experiences with trying to understand the trumpet and figure it out, I didn't get direct answers. I got philosophical treatises, or theoretical responses. I didn't get somebody to say, I see what's going on there, change this, do this, and this will be fixed. And I think because there aren't a lot of people who are willing to go into the specifics of embouchure technique, people who do what I do now are sometimes viewed with skepticism by the community of people who believe analysis is paralysis, which is a big movement in brass pedagogy right now. And as a player, I believe I can show an example of the opposite. Somebody who analyzed his way out of many problems, some of which were physical accidents that happened to me, and some were just lack of understanding of how to be a better player. And so in my experience of having these accidents and injuries, in some ways I was forced into this path. So as I said earlier, we learn from we teach the way we were taught, and we teach from our own experience. And the first thing that happened was when I was 16 years old, I got my first flugelhorn. It was a beautiful Benge flugelhorn. I wish I still had it. But I didn't realize that you got to tighten that screw really tight on the tuning slide in the front of the flugelhorn. And I was goofing around and playing really hard, and it snapped. It went bam. And I stuck these two teeth right through my upper lip. And I had to pull my lip off my teeth. And they took me to the emergency room, and I got 3 stitches right there, right where the mouthpiece rim would sit. And so I have a huge scar right there in the center of my upper lip from the age of 16. Now, when I came back playing, I didn't think much about it, and I was really, I didn't know anything, so I just kept going, just kept playing, and things weren't as easy as they were before. I had been more natural with my tone production. I'd gotten lucky. I'd done things right without realizing what it was I was doing, which can happen. And then nothing would work. So I just kind of like on my own, just try this, try that, and just kept playing, and I got better. I got to a certain level. I went to college and studied trumpet with Vince DiMartino at the University of Kentucky, and he was a wonderful teacher and a great trumpeter and a person who inspired me to learn the trumpet, to be not just a jazz head, but get into trumpet and be a trumpet player. And hanging around Vince, that will happen to you. He's so energetic and so excited about it and so into it. And Vince always says that he didn't really want to get into specifics of stuff with me because I wasn't having that many problems. He was teaching me repertoire, the classical repertoire, teaching me sight transposition, teaching me how to play the C trumpet, the E flat trumpet, the piccolo trumpet. We were working on this stuff. And as a jazz player, we didn't really have jazz at our school at that time. And I was out doing what I did. And he could see that I had my own path. And he always says, he when he talks to people about having me as a student, he didn't want to show me anything because he didn't want to get in my way, or he didn't want to influence me. And he certainly, some of my peers who were students there with him at the time, kind of ended up sounding like Vince, So there is that, but when I got out of school and I was back in Chicago and I was just so deeply into the jazz scene and just playing and playing and playing, my chops went to crap after about a year, and my career, quote unquote career, was doing that. I was getting these opportunities to play with the people I dreamed of playing with, and it was happening sooner than I dreamed it would, faster. And my trumpet playing was going the opposite direction. The tone was splitting, had no range, had no endurance. When I was playing with Red Rodney, I asked him, I said, how come, you can play so easy up and down, and I have these other people, these great lead players, and they can play. I can't play high notes, and I can't seem to get through a 2-set gig. And he said, don't worry about that, man. You'll get your high notes when you're older. And I was mad at that answer because I thought that was a bullshit answer. It turned out it was true. He was right. But just that answer wasn't enough. Well, this started the second period of trumpet lessons, which went on for a long time, where I sought out all the most famous brass teachers. And remember, being in Chicago, being in the Midwest, I had access to the big names, and I studied with all of them. And what I heard mostly was, you're not concentrating hard enough about the sound in your mind, or you have too much resistance in your equipment, or you're not breathing freely enough. You need to increase your lung capacity. You need to, these are the things I heard. I heard a lot of things that sounded like the musical The Music Man. Remember when the professor has the think system?
Think system.
I heard about the think system, and I spent a lot of money and a lot of energy subscribing to the think system, and nothing improved. I mean, maybe my tone improved. I don't know, but the problems I was having didn't get any better, and this was many years. Well, flash forward many years. I'd taken my first full-time teaching job. I was teaching at the Cincinnati Conservatory, and I was practicing whisper tones. Somebody told me practice whisper tones like a flute player, and this will get your response will be the thing, So I had my eyes closed. I was standing near the large 6-inch thick wood soundproof door of my teaching studio. It was ajar. Somebody opened it into me and bashed my lip. Same thing. This time the teeth didn't go all the way through, but actually my lip kind of went down between my teeth and I kind of bit it. Uh-huh. And it was so swollen, it looked like I had a ping pong ball in my lip. And luckily, there was no real tear to my muscle. But the doctor said, well, ice that lip, take the swelling down. He says you should ice it 10 minutes every hour for a couple days until the swelling is gone. So, okay. So I was watching television, get my ice, 10 minutes, next hour, 10 minutes, swelling went down. Well, the doctor didn't tell me, don't put the ice directly on your lip, which I am telling you, podcast listener people, trumpet players, don't ice your lip. And I would say don't ice your lip, period, ever. Because what happened to me was I destroyed the muscle tone in my lip and I shrunk the muscle and I turned it to mush. It was like one step short of frostbite. And at that point, this was my sound. And that was all I could do. I could not make a tone on trumpet. And so I became severely depressed, didn't know what to do about teaching the trumpet lessons I had to teach. I had to cancel all my gigs. After several weeks of very bad depression, my wife found out about Dr. Simon McGrail, who was in Toronto, and he was an ENT, ear, nose, throat doctor, and a plastic surgeon, and a French horn player who had a specialty practice in dealing with injuries to vocalists and injuries to brass players. Apparently the only person in the world who did such a thing. Now, he, as a plastic surgeon, believed that he could do surgeries for people who had torn their lip by playing with a weak embouchure, which they call Satchmo syndrome. Repair it in a way that would heal without as much scarring as the injury itself and make it easier for brass players to continue their careers. Oddly, it's mostly French hornists having these injuries, although it does happen to trumpet players and even more rarely to low brass players. But it does happen. My case was different in that I didn't have a similar kind of injury, and the injury I basically had was this shrinking of the lip and destroying of the muscle tissue by over-icing. The accident itself wasn't that big a deal. And Dr. McGrail had designed physical therapy exercises for the lip, where you basically do reps, like with the weightlifting principle. Most muscles in your body are designed to adhere and work against a bone or joint. But the lip is a sphincter, it's an oval, and there are 3 of them in your body. One is here, one is in your glottis, it's the swallowing muscle, and the third is, of course, your sphincter. They don't attach, so there's no logical way to rehab a muscle like that. but Dr. McGrail ingeniously thought you would substitute the teeth for bone and do reps of your lifting exercises, pulling your lips against your teeth. And I would use various thicknesses of cotton gauze pads. These are exercises he designed for his recovering surgery patients. But it turned out that since the damage to my muscle was so much greater than it was in people who had playing injuries, I had to do these exercises about 5 times as long to recover as his other patients did. In the end, one of the side stories is that Dr. McGrail would often refer his patients to me for help in learning his rehab exercises, since I'd kind of become the guinea pig. And I'm still helping people with that when people have injuries and they need to recover with physical therapy. In my own playing, as I began to get slightly more strength in my lip, I could start to make a little bit of a buzz, and there would be a little sound, and I could start practicing again. Now, over this long period of time, I did these exercises, which for me was about 18 months. By the way, this was 2001, 2002 when this happened. So 20 years ago. All the things I'd heard about trumpet playing from all these great teachers led me not to be able to play the trumpet at all. Whereas when I started researching other things, I found I could get around and make things happen. So the process of learning how to play again with no strength in my lip was a kind of a clarifying process for me in weeding through all the information and all the advice I'd gotten from these years of trumpet lessons and seeing what was not helping me and what was. In particular, I went to Clark Terry for help. And Clark helped me quite a bit by first talking about utilizing my corners or my buccinator muscles actively in playing. And he taught me how to start doing this. But he also said something to me that other people had said, which is read Reinhardt's book. And Donald Reinhardt, of course, was a brass teacher, a trombonist brass teacher who analyzed hundreds of players and found out that there are mechanics involved in manipulating a brass instrument, and that depending on your facial structure and your teeth, there are certain movements that make things happen for you. The movements make things happen for everybody, but you tailor your abilities, your movements to your physical setup. And so I studied Reinhardt diligently, and I studied with some of his students, particularly with Wes Orr, who's a lead trumpet player in Columbus, Ohio.
Teachers.
Oh, okay. Wes got me on the right track, and eventually I got to Dave Sheets, who was a great lead player who played in Atlantic City for years and was maybe the person who studied with Reinhardt over the most number of years. And understanding how things work opened a couple doors for me. The first thing is I changed my technical approach to playing. So the happy ending to my sad tale is I never regained the full strength in my lip. I just gained enough to make a buzz. And my lip is not the same shape it was before the icing. It's smaller. The upside is I completely changed the way I think about having the trumpet work, and the idea of understanding the mechanics of the instrument became very important to me. And before the accident, I could, really play up to about a high E flat solidly above high C. I could never play lead. Now I warm up to triple C every morning. First thing I do in my warm up. And since the accident, I've been a very busy lead trumpet player, which I kind of always wanted to do, but never had the understanding of the instrument to be able to do. The other thing that happened was Dr. McGrail started sending these patients to me, and I started understanding why so many people were being hurt or injured, because they weren't getting instruction on embouchure. They were just getting instruction to say, don't think about embouchure. And they had muscle failure. So I became also interested in helping those people relearn how to play after their injuries to prevent further injuries. Well, the more I got into this stuff, not only did it benefit my own playing, but I started myself, like Reinhardt had, to study people and make observations and see what I could see. And so the last 20 years I've had this side interest outside of being a musician and being a music teacher. I become interested in understanding the mechanics of embouchure and being able to help people who are having the kind of difficulties understanding the trumpet that I did, by giving them specific technical, physical advice on the physical aspects of their playing, breathing, embouchure, etc., equipment. I've entered this other area, but like I said, oftentimes people are reluctant to call somebody like me because I'm saying in many ways the opposite things of what these other teachers, we call them end result teachers. In other words, the end result is the only thing that's important. Knowing how you get it should be relegated to the unconscious mind. That seems to be the predominant school of thought in brass teaching today. And so somebody like me who says, no, know exactly how you do everything. How does that lip slur work? What exactly are you doing? How can you control it? I sound like a nut. And they treated Reinhardt like a nut during his lifetime as well. I have a friend who's he's a good friend. We love each other. He's a classical trumpet teacher at a major university, successful performer. He saw the Reinhardt book on my desk. He picked it up. He said, "This is the book I show my students to say, look how complicated brass playing can be made to seem when it's really just simple." And I said to him, "That's the book that saved my career." So we all need different things at different times. So that was the short version of the 5-hour answer I could have given you. I tried to give you the shortest.
Well, that apparently we're going to need to have about 10 more episodes to get because this is really fascinating, and I think that because there's a yin yang. So like at the bottom, like there on my desk right by my book is my little yin yang cup, and I keep it there because it represents the fundamental concept that I kind of live my life by, which is the yin yang theory, which a lot of people in the West don't understand. They think it's about like these divergent points. It's the idea that everything works together. They're not in opposition. They're opposite. They are complementary opposites, and they're matters of perspective. So if you think about the brain, the way the brain works, you have your conscious mind, you have your unconscious or subconscious mind, depending on how you want to phrase that. But yes, I agree with the concept that, yeah, you have to let your subconscious go. You have to come from there, because that's where your habits exist. But how do you get habits? Habits through conscious repetition.
Exactly.
So if you already have the mechanics, if everything is right, if you didn't have any problems, then yes, it would just simply be about getting the sound in your head and letting it come out. But if you have something that's in the mechanism that is off just slightly, because of the nature of a holistic system, something is going to change. If you don't understand how that change affects the rest of the system, then you never be able to get the results that you really want, because your concept and your facility are at odds at that point. So it's that being able to understand, what is the process? How does the process work? Let me make sure I've got everything in place, and then I can just get out of the way and let that come out. But
Exactly.
It's that circle, people don't, it's the work that you got to put into it. And sometimes people just don't want to do the work, man.
Yeah. And to go back to, I was telling you the story of my life, but thanks for listening to all that. If anybody cares, but strings have always kind of come easily. I mean, I can go for weeks and not touch a bass, and somebody calls and says, "Hey, we need a bass player tonight," and I go play the gig, and I'm fine. I have enough chops and endurance, and it's okay, But the trumpet, obviously, for me, my process has been, I've always been a very precocious musician, but my technique was not adequate to play what I was hearing. My fingers would do it, but my face and my breathing wouldn't do those things. And that was the frustration for me. That's why I sought so many teachers for so long. Now I have more technique than some people think I need. My technique is to the point where now I can play for you what I'm hearing, and maybe you don't have the patience to hear it. But there are these people who are trumpet jocks. We know people like that, where they're just like to play the trumpet, and the musicianship isn't at the level of the instrumental ability. But I don't believe I'm one of those people. But I do believe that the answer for me was to not quit, and maybe not take no for an answer, even when life was, giving me lemons. Yeah. I think there's a way to figure out how to do this, but the best thing we have is knowledge, and to say you don't need to know anything about that, to me feels irresponsible.
Yeah.
After what I've been through.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that if you've never had problems, then you don't need to know it. If you're getting the results that you want,
until something goes wrong.
Until something goes wrong,
and then you don't know what it was you were doing in the first place.
Exactly. And like for me, I talked to you about it, kind of pre-interview. But I had an embouchure change that I was forced to go through by a professor, and it being someone who has studied Reinhardt, I mean, you could look at me pretty much right away and be able to tell that I'm a type 4 player, and because of the structure of my jaw. So upstream, low set, textbook. What was the first thing they did? Move me up.
Because it didn't look right to them based on what they thought they knew.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I wasn't getting sound. I wasn't getting the best sound. I didn't have the best, I had range, but I didn't have a lot of accuracy or control over that. But those are now that I know could have been addressed without doing any of the stuff that was done, at which my experience, I studied with Wes. I was going to Ohio State University.
Okay.
I studied with Wes years later for a brief period of time, but we never really got into the Reinhardt stuff. It wasn't until I met Doug Elliott. And Doug worked with me a little bit, and he was the one that kind of put things together for me. And he said, "Here's your problem." Because I knew that I was an upstream player. I knew all that sort of stuff. I was trying to put it back in. He said, the problem is that because of the problems that you got from the embouchure change and how hard you worked at that, your mind is fighting against itself, because you know what you want to do, but you're reverting back to that habit that they had instilled with you. So, because I when I would do the things consciously that he would say, no problem. But I start to play music and I would immediately switch back to that old ingrained pattern.
Right.
And that's where we get into trouble, when we just let the subconscious go. That's great. But if the subconscious has been programmed wrong, then you're in big trouble. So that's why I really love that analytical approach, because yes, you can get paralysis by analysis, but that's over analysis. It's not analysis, it's over analysis.
Right.
So the more we can understand something and how it works and why it works, then the better chance you have of gaining consistency in whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, man, I could talk on this subject for hours, man.
Yeah.
But
it's so great that you know Wes, though. That's wonderful. He's one of my favorite guys.
Oh man,
we played together in the Columbus Jazz Orchestra for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good friend. Yeah.
Yeah. I left Columbus in the early '80s and was back for a short stint from like mid like '87 through about '92, '93.
Okay.
So
I left Chicago in '97 and lived in Cincinnati from '97 to 2004. And those were the years where I was driving back to forth to Columbus 100 times a year.
Yeah.
To play in the band. Yeah. So
that was a good
yeah. Great experience. Yeah.
One of my favorite trombone players in that band too, Vaughn Weister.
Oh yeah.
Man.
Sure.
What a guy. All right. Well, we could go on these subjects forever, but I know that your time is limited, and I've got to get through 3 very important segments here for our listening audience.
Okay.
Audience, whatever you want to call them.
Okay.
So this first segment is brought to us by my good friend Michael Barkley of Barkley Microphones. It's called Sound Off. And Sound Off is about your approach to sound. And I think it's a great tie-in we're talking about with embouchure as well, and with jazz concepts. So how do you approach not just the production of sound, but the ways that you view sound as a vehicle for the music that you're playing, and the advice that you give to people about sound?
Despite all of my attempts to improve my sound, change it, morph it, imagine it, as these teachers would have had me to doing, imagine somebody else's sound. I spent a lot of years chasing that. I can listen to the first record I made, which was 1988, and the last record I made, something I recorded last week. And if I really am trying to be objective, pretty much the tone is pretty much the same. And I've changed depths of cups. I've changed the bores. I've changed the back bores. I've changed from large bore trumpets to small bore trumpets, medium, big bells, little bells. I sound like me. I sound like me with a little bit of difference on a little bit different shaped equipment, but only a little bit. So I sound like me because I am me, partly because of what's in my unconscious mind, but also because of my physical structure, because of the size of my oral cavity, the size of my throat, the size of my tongue, what my teeth do. my job is to get the best, purest, cleanest sound possible without trying to sound like somebody else and without fighting with my physical system and my equipment. In other words, this is more life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Look, when I make a sine wave long tone sound on this trumpet and I'm playing as efficiently as I can, it's going to sound like this. Let me work with that and make it the most beautiful musical sound I can make. I'm never going to be Bud Herseth. I don't care what equipment I play and how many hours I spend imagining I sound like Bud Herseth. I'm still going to basically sound the way I sounded on that recording in 1988. So it took me a long time to realize that. So my approach is take the sound that God gave you and work on it and hone it and learn to control it and learn to manipulate it and shape it and twist it and do whatever you need to do with it. But you don't just go pick a sound off a tree. I wish I sounded like Freddie Hubbard. I wish I sounded like Lee Morgan. It doesn't work like that. And if you're chasing that, it could be a long chase with a disappointing finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Learn to love your sound.
Well, make your sound lovable, but don't make it work on it. But don't try to do something that's physically impossible for you to do.
Yeah.
Do what's easy to do and what's low maintenance and what's repeatable and make it beautiful.
Wow.
I mean, Maurice Andre does not sound like Dizzy Gillespie, and we're grateful for that. We don't want them to sound the same.
Exactly.
Wow.
Awesome. Okay, I love that. All right. Our next segment is brought to us by Venture Mouthpieces. This is called Geared Up Venture, where technology, design, and craftsmanship intersect. Use the code TrumpetGurus21, get 10% off your order. So Geared Up is the obligatory discussion on all things gear, but we don't want to get in that rabbit hole of specifically like what's the best mouthpiece to play a double high C on, but just the concept that you have of the relationship between gear and the player, with that being the embouchure being the interface. How do these things work together, and what are the things that people need to think about when they're considering the type of gear that they use?
I think the important questions are not necessarily about tone color, because I think you can change your tone color to a degree by dealing with depth and shape of cup. I think the important questions are impedance and resistance, and you want, as my friend Fariz Wedded said, some people are buzzers and some people are blowers. And maybe that's an oversimplification, but some people really like to feel like they're putting a lot of air into the instrument. That's how they want to feel when they're playing. Other people don't want to feel like that at all. And I might be the farthest from that. So based on the way you like to deliver your air, do you want a closed oral cavity? Do you want an open oral cavity? Is your embouchure, are you playing with an embouchure that's set closed? Are you playing with an embouchure that's set open? Finding the balance to where you're feeling the resistance and impedance that makes you comfortable with the way you like to play, moving with flexibility, changes of dynamics, control of attacks in different registers. I think that's the important search. But if we're on a safari for mouthpieces and trumpets, I think being in touch with how you like to feel when you do what you do easily is where the equipment becomes more important. If you're looking for equipment to give you that magic sound or that magic extra range, again, that might be a very futile kind of pursuit. I know how I like to feel, and the more I practice in my own search, the less air I want to put in the trumpet, and the more resistance I want in my equipment. So, every few years or so, there's like, can I go a notch smaller in this way, narrower? It's like things have been getting tighter. That's been my process. I know other people, things have been getting more open. But the resistance of the equipment is, I think, more important than choosing equipment for sound. It's the feel. If somebody, I hear this thing a lot of times. The audience doesn't care what you feel like; they only care what they hear. And then I go, yeah, but can I also say, I care what I feel like? So if I'm feeling really good, it's a completely different music making experience than if I'm up there huffing and puffing and struggling. And that's a completely different way of feeling. And I don't want to feel like that.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for the equipment that makes the feeling of playing easier. Always looking for the easier feeling.
Okay. Yeah.
You know.
Why fight?
Yeah. And you could go to an extreme with that, and I might be one of the crazy people who did.
Yeah. Well,
So, but I'm trying to do what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to do what you're trying to do. So
exactly.
that knowing that is helpful in selecting equipment also. What is your gig?
Yeah.
And what makes your gig easier?
Well, and I think that the word resistance has gotten a bad rap in the trumpet world. Just like the word stress has gotten a bad rap in the business world.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently did a presentation on you cannot survive without stress. People think, stress is the worst thing in the world. No, you need stress. You have to have stress. If that's how we get stuff done. The problem is what kind of stress, how much, where does it occur in a cycle? So for a trumpet, it's the same thing. It's resistance is necessary. If there was no resistance, it's really not going to work. But it's where do you want it to be, and how much you need that feedback.
And some of us who like a lot of resistance want it in different parts of the equipment because we're the feeling that makes us comfortable is different from person to person.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people talk about either wanting to. Some people want to feel like they're blowing into the note, or so it's further down the horn, so they've got something to blow into, as opposed to someone who feel like they have something to blow against. Mm-hmm. And it's exactly that personal feeling. And I think when you understand that concept, then it's easier for you to dial in your equipment because you know what, again, that analysis part, when you understand how that works and why that works, then you can make logical decisions about how to create the situation that's going to give you what you need.
Yeah.
So, all right, very cool, man. We can have all these deep conversations, and I'd say that would be a lot of trouble if I was in Colorado. So.
We'd have some fun though.
Yeah. All right. Final segment. This is brought to us by Robinson's Remedies, rapid relief for your sore and tired chops. This is the Robinson's Remedy rapid fire rounds, a series of questions that go all over the place and all kinds of topics here. So it gets deep into the mind of Brad Goode, which may be a scary place. All right, so here we go. Brad, are you ready? Here's your first question.
I'm ready. Yeah.
All right. Who's the biggest influence on your life that's not a trumpet player?
Von Freeman.
All right. What's your favorite book?
Oh, what's my favorite book?
Besides the Pivot System.
I loved Ulysses. I read it when I was a senior in high school, James Joyce.
Okay. What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
The worst. Gosh. I don't know. I guess Plan 9 from Outer Space is a classic. That's the classic answer. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
He did one called Edward did one called Glenn or Glenda. That's worse.
I have seen that one as well.
That is worse, yeah.
All right. If you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to be?
I think a teacher of some sort.
Okay.
Yeah, that, by the way, is the family business, but both my parents were educators.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's your favorite drink?
Red Bull.
Busy man. All right. You can have a dinner party, and at this dinner party, you can invite any 3 people in the world, any 3 living people. Who would you want to have there?
Living people at a dinner party. Oh my gosh, these are really hard questions. Man, I don't even know how to answer that. Living people at a dinner party. I'm stumped, man. I don't know who they would be.
All right. Well, we'll go to part 2 of the question.
Okay.
Any 3 people from history? Any 3 people in the longer?
Ooh, people from history. Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker, and Igor Stravinsky.
Okay, some good conversation there, for sure. All right, lacquer plated or raw?
Raw or plated, Schilke proved there's no difference in the sound, whereas lacquer changes the sound dramatically.
Okay. What is your favorite quote?
Charlie Parker said to one of my friends and mentors, Joe Daly, when Joe Daly asked him, "What is the secret of your playing?" Charlie Parker said, "Come on, man. You know, if you don't play totally by ear, you're wrong. You know that, don't you?"
Well, there's the secret right there. The secret to jazz. Okay. What is your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is that I will not be able to help a student achieve what they're trying to achieve.
Okay.
That I won't be helpful to them.
All right. You could be granted one superpower. What would it be?
Superpower. Whew. I think I'd like to be able to play the things I can play equally in all 12 keys.
Ooh.
I know some people with that superpower, but I'm not one of them.
Let's not get crazy. I thought I was going to be turning water into Red Bull. All right. What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
Breathing.
What aspect do you feel is the most underrated?
Articulation.
All right. You can go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
Spend less time with repetition and more time with problem solving.
Okay. And while you're back there, you're going to give your younger self one piece of advice about life.
When you're in an amazing circumstance, make sure to stop and take it in and appreciate where you are right then.
That's a good one. All right, final question for Mr. Bradley Goode. What do you want your legacy to be?
Ooh, two things. One is selfish, and one might be less selfish. The selfish one is I would like to leave a record of unique music, and that I've left. The unselfish, the less selfish one is I want to help as many musicians have more success and more love of music as I can.
Well, I would say based on your current track, you're well on your way to both of those. So
thank you.
Just one step at a time. Keep going, man. And I really and completely serious that I could talk about those topics of pedagogy and embouchure for hours on end, and we may have to do that at some point. It's just sit down.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Anytime.
I'll bring the Red Bull and and we can share some West Or stories. So, yeah. But yeah, seriously, man, this has been really great. Some fantastic insights, and I'm sure that we'll be in touch more about some of these things as time progresses.
Okay, thank you, Will. It's been a pleasure being with you, and I've really enjoyed this, and I hope some trumpet players get some things out of it.
I'm certain that they would. So thank you very much for joining us for this episode of The Hang. If you got any questions or comments, you can always drop them to me. And like and subscribe and share and all that good stuff. And we'll catch you on the next one. As always, folks, peace and slide grease. We out. Thanks for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating deeper connections through our mutual love of music and the trumpet life. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast and also like and share this episode with a friend. We want to see The Hang grow for show. Please support our sponsors and consider becoming a personal supporter of this podcast as well. Remember, for less than the price of a bottle of valve oil a month, you can keep this podcast moving smoothly. The Trumpet Guru's Hang is recorded